Hi, welcome to my channel where we question everything. Today's topic is politics, but the subject is not yet clear because a video that I saw with Scott Ritter that he was talking to some young guys. I can't remember, unfortunately I lost that link, so I'm not sure with whom he talked, but it's not about Scott Ritter per se. But what he has said inspired me actually to make this video. And then we also had some recent speeches that were given by Lloyd Austin, and that contributed hopefully to today's narrative. So what I'm going to do is I'm probably going to ramble on and try to express a view or try to make sense of the current political events, but this is not definitely, it's fairly speculative. It's basically call it as food for thought. So let's start, and I will start with what Scott Ritter has said. Again, it's not about him, it's about what he said. And basically what he has referred to was the so-called deep state. Now, I'm sorry, I've looked up everywhere and the deep state is mentioned many times before, but it's never really defined and who these people are. But basically, it is the, if I can deduct it from Scott Ritter's narrative, or the story that he told more, it is the people that are basically, I would say, permanently employed or permanently in positions of power in the US government. And it doesn't matter really which president comes to power and who gets at the head of certain sections. These people basically control what is happening. And specifically things that he mentioned of is a couple of examples, like Obama came in, was elected on a matter of peace, and he wanted to close Gitmo, Guantanamo Bay, and that was one of his provinces, and when he left after 8 years, Gitmo was still open. It's still today open. So basically what Scott has tried to explain is that the president doesn't have all the power in America, and although he might give instructions or issue directives and so on, it's not always that those directives or instructions are obeyed. In this case, say the military decided that all the security agents like the CIA or the NSA decided, no, they don't want to close Guantanamo Bay, they want to keep it open, then they would maybe deliberately try to go slow, try to postpone everything until there's a new president elected and so forth. So those instructions are never executed. Also, Obama wanted to have peace. I mean, he was given the Nobel Prize for Peace, whatever that meant. I criticized him a lot about that. But at the end of the day, he didn't want to start always war, but, well, for 8 years, Obama waged war against a various amount of nations. And if you remember, if you can remember, there was one US general, I believe, it wasn't Petraeus, it was before him, that said that he got the message in the halls of the Pentagon that says we're going to invade 7 countries in 5 years. I don't know if you remember that. I just want to say something. Sometimes I assume that you as a viewer are aware of certain items and that you know what I'm talking about. So if you don't understand, then I'm sorry, I assumed you would know about this specific event. But in any case, so let's go forward. It's like Donald Donald Trump gave instructions for the troops to be reduced in Afghanistan and in Iraq. And the end of the day is the troops were increased. So the deep state, or the powers that be, or the people that don't want to change, or don't want to listen to their commander-in-chief, went against the grain and then against his instructions, and then increased the forces. Now, basically what it means is that neither has Biden or W. Bush any control of what was happening. And unfortunately, then one has to assume, I have to agree with Scott Ritter about this, so don't make any mistake about it. One then has to assume that this narrative is fairly true, and that the US president is not the most powerful person in the world. And that's why also one of the reasons why I always say that there will be no nuclear war, because there will always be some people that are sane enough to prevent a senile old man who is the US president to technically, theoretically push the button. He doesn't have full control of the button, just enters the instructions, nuclear retaliation or nuclear attack codes, and then other people execute them. And if you understand that, and if you believe or support this narrative, then one has to come to the conclusion, or not the conclusion, then there's an alternative view that is submerging, or, submerging, emerging. Which actually means that whatever is displayed in the news media is not the truth. It's all a smokescreen. There are a lot of other forces behind the scenes, decisions being made behind the scenes, negotiations being made behind the scenes. And if you think about this, well, before you think about this, then I would like to come to another statement that Lloyd J has made. Now, he has made several speeches in the last couple of days on his tour to the East, and he has made some remarks. And you can listen to his speeches. I actually read some of them. And whatever he accuses Russia and whatever he accuses China, no, neither Russia or China has done that, but the US has done that. So it's basically accusing your opponent of all the things that you have been doing. But what the message I got from his speeches was that the war in Ukraine is an existential war for the West as well. We know it's an existential war for Russia and for the South, as they call it, and China. So that was discussed many times before, but it also is existential conflict for the West. And one has to ask yourself, why? Well, it threatens the dominance and the special status that the West has enjoyed through all these centuries. I mean, the West was always the strongest. It was a colonial type of force. It basically sucked the rest of the world dry, conquered a lot of people, effectively made them slaves, but not, okay, they did make physical slaves of them, but in the modern times, we are financial slaves. And the rest of the world is basically supporting the lifestyles of Americans and Europeans as well. And nobody in the world really has any autonomy. It's actually, it's commonly said that Americans is an hegemon. No, it's not a hegemon per se. Not if you go according to the definition of that. It doesn't want to build an empire. The US doesn't want to build an empire. It has already created an empire by default. And the way that it created by default is when the US dollar was made the world currency. although it was still coupled to the gold price, it became so entrenched into the world's financial system that when the US type sort of withdrew or disconnected the US dollar from the gold price or the gold itself, then it was so entrenched that the US dollar was kept like that, and everybody accepted because they had no choice. And in the beginning, it wasn't really exploited and abused, but in the last 20 years or more, the dollar has been abused significantly. And then with the establishment of the petrodollar, the special position that America enjoyed in the world was basically enshrined or guaranteed. Now, unfortunately, and then we had Europe, and then Europe tried to do something really similar, and they created the Eurozone, and they created the Euro itself, and they hope that the Euro will have the similar type of special position as a reserve currency as a US dollar would have, but we knew it will never totally surpass the US dollar. But it would have had one of the top positions, and then the same benefit that the Americans enjoy by the rest of the world funding the US dollar, Europe's hope for the same. So then if you look, and like I said, you consider the statements of Lloyd Austin, and you remember what Scott Ritter has said, and if you consider that Americans and Europe had a special position in the world, privileged provision, it is now commonly said that this is going to come to an end. And the reason why it is coming to an end is because Russia and China have said no. They've drawn a red line in the sand and they said, up till now, we tolerated your privileged position, but we're not going to do it anymore, and we're going to establish an alternative because you have been abusing your privileged position. And essentially, that is what is boiling down. It has become an existential battle for both spheres. The West, in order to maintain their privileged position, and I would like to call them the East, not the South. I don't know why. Why is it the South? They are still in the Northern Hemisphere. But in any case, say the Eastern countries, Russia and China and all the rest of the world. And they don't say no, and they want to now create their own system, and they don't want to be exploited anymore, and they want to create their own living standards and ensure prosperity in their own countries and not be subservient to the US, because they have seen what has happened to the last 20 years where so many countries were invaded and destroyed who didn't want to conform to the benefit, basically, of the US, and who stood up and tried to stand up for their rights, and they unfortunately couldn't do it. And Saddam Hussein is a good example, and Gaddafi is a good example. Assad in Syria, the Taliban, they didn't want to conform and build a oil pipeline, and then they were told they will be bombed and so on. So this is why there is an existential battle going on, and that is why Russia constantly claims that it's not fighting Ukraine alone, but fighting the complete NATO and the Western world. And now one has to ask yourself, how far is the Western world going to go? How far are they willing to go? For the last 8 years, they have trained the Ukrainian army into NATO standards. It was supposed to be the biggest army and the most well-trained army well, not in the world, that's a little bit far-fetched, but in Europe maybe. And they put their hope on that would be, that the army would be strong enough. And then the Western world tried to play the big bully type of guy and later on force Russia into a conflict. And then they made the calculation that, or they made an error in judgment. They really believed that the Russian economy would collapse, and it wouldn't take long before Russia would be sort of economically damaged and weakened, and basically the war wouldn't last that long. On the other hand, we also now have to talk that the European nations are destroying themselves, and they do it at the behest of the US. And then we ask ourselves, but why are these countries allowing that? Why are they destroying themselves? Well, that's a narrative. The Americans have told them, listen, boys and girls, this fight in Ukraine is not a normal battle. It is an existential battle. You either fight it now, or you give up your position, and you will become just a normal person that has to work for its money, and work hard for its money, and accept poverty, and accept competition, etc., etc., etc. And that is my opinion. Well, not my opinion. This is currently an opinion that is washing around in my brain. And that might be the reason why the European countries are willing to sacrifice so much and even risk the destruction of their own countries, because they understand and they support the idea that this is an existential battle for them as well. Because what other reasons is there unless you want to talk corruption? But I'm sorry, I don't think that the corruption on that level and on this wide scope is really possible. You can always corrupt a couple of people, but not all of them. But what we see it all over. And I know the narrative sounds funny for the Western countries. Yes, we constantly accuse them of living in a bubble and telling fake news, spreading fake news and all this other stuff. But I'm sorry to say, I've been following now a lot of pro-Russian sites as well. And you know, I've made some videos where I said I disagree with this and this and this and this guy and so on. Because I found out that these guys are also living in a bubble. Sorry to say. They constantly talk the same narrative without sometimes the necessary facts or evidence, if you don't want to call it. And even if there is evidence, they don't want to acknowledge that there are changes, especially the changes on the battlefield. Things I would like to talk about, well, which I could mention about the narratives, is this. You know, the Ukrainian army is destroyed. They are losing a couple of hundred men per day. All their best fighters are gone. They're putting in old men. Their armor is destroyed. They are running out of ammunition. The weapons that are being supplied by the West is not enough. The morale is bad among the Ukrainians. The Russians are just superior in their artillery firepower. And the Russians are super soldiers. And I'm sorry to say, but all this is bullshit. Nowhere, anywhere, has any evidence been provided about the amount of artillery and armor that the Ukrainians have lost. It's a narrative that is being spread all over the world with no facts or figures or evidence, nothing. Zilch. The only source of that is the Russian Ministry of Defense daily report. And I've talked about many times, those numbers don't make sense, so I have to come to the conclusion the Russians are lying. Well, they were lying intentionally, I don't know. We see a lot of videos of UIVs that are supposed to show the destructions of Ukrainian armor and positions, so on. But if you look nicely about these videos now, UIV that are made available, they zoom into an area, they show you the Ukrainian forces, and then they zoom out. But they don't zoom out like that, zooming like constant. No. It's Enoch, and then suddenly it's outlined, and you're not sure if you even see the same area. And then you see a missile coming in, or artillery fire coming in, and then you see a lot of plumes, and then you have to assume that the target you just saw was a target that was destructed. But there is no continuation in that. And then the video stops. Go make the effort. Go on Telegram. Go on southfront.org. They have a lot of videos of these things. You don't see it. Why didn't the UIV remain zoomed in, or at least go a little bit back so that you can see where the artillery has landed, and you can see the destruction of the armor or the soldier? But you don't see that. Now, also, as like I explained in a different video, there was a Ukrainian that said he was trained in a camp, an army camp, and then he was staying, there were 3 buildings, and he was staying in the one building, and a missile attack was done, and it destroyed the main building. But no soldiers were killed, but the Russians reported so many deaths. And the next night, the Russians attacked the second building, and the Russians declared, oh, they killed so many people. But all 2 of these buildings were empty. The Russians didn't know it, so they killed nobody. So the numbers are wrong. I think there's a lot of assumptions being made on the Russian side, on killed in action and destruction and so on. Because every single time, second day, the Russians report they shot down another Ukrainian aircraft. The Ukrainians attack, and then 8 tanks are destroyed, or 3 tanks are destroyed. How long are you going to keep this up? Because how many tanks does Ukraine still have? I've talked about this before. And then also, you know, okay, like I said, I read the pro-Russian ones. I don't even bother going to the West because they're just talking nonsense. And then the pro-Russians, you can see that they talk about the Ukrainians, not always. They sometimes talk to their Slav brothers and the Russian speakings, and Ukrainians are the same as Russians. But that is like detached when they talk about the soldiers. So it's like they make a distinction between when it suits them. But when they talk about the soldiers, then these are sort of like subhuman. Like what you typically do when you want to encourage a person to shoot another person, like I talked about this, you have to degrade it to a subhuman species in order for that soldier to finally kill that person. So the Ukrainian troops are presented as being dumb, inferior, not capable of training, properly trained. They are under weapon, they are demoralized and so on. And all this bullshit, but there's propaganda on the Russian side. I just can't understand it. You can watch the videos of the pro-Ukrainians. They talk to the soldiers. And the soldiers talk to them normally back, just like in the pro-Russian videos. It's no difference. It's the same people, it's the same thing. And the Ukrainians tell them, yeah, well, we are a UIV team, and we have ensured that a Russian artillery piece was taken out, and we have 1 tank on our assets that we sort of destroyed, and we have done this and we have done. Yes, you can believe that. Because why? Because you always have to think about that. If you are here on this, if you think you are a normal person, you are a teacher or you're a mechanic or you are a flippant engineer or whatever you are, and you're sitting in this trench, just remember, the enemy on that side in the trench is a person just like you. He's also an engineer or a teacher or a doctor or a flippant mechanic or whatever. There is no real difference between soldiers. We are all human beings. And we all have a little bit of brains and intelligence. And the Ukrainians will adapt to the Russian war of attrition. They will adapt to that. And they have counter-battery baradas. And they have long-distance artillery, Soviet versions. And they do have the HIMARS. They can travel 70, 80 kilometers. They all do have that. And they have special forces. And they have snipers. And they have mortar teams. And they have tanks and APCs. Just like the Russians. So, so what's going to happen? All right, so now we have the Russians slowly destroying the power network of Ukraine. And unfortunately, that's a very bad thing for the Ukrainians. It puts a hell of a lot of pressure on the civilians. But if they are patriotic, then they will take it. They will suffer the consequence, the cold, the darkness, and they will survive, depending on how they feel about the whole conflict, and how patriotic they are, and how loyal, and what values do they have. It doesn't mean the end of the Ukrainian civilization. And yes, the current transformers are, I can't remember now the volts. They are Soviet type of transformers. Well, they can be replaced by Western systems. They can be adapted to a Western system. It's engineering is a question of money and time. How much money do you have? How much time do you have? An engineer can resolve any this. I talked about the breaches. Why did the Russians not destroy the breaches? Because breaches can be returned. It's not, the cost versus benefit didn't make sense. It's better to destroy the power system. That's a lot more cost effective. But coming back to the whole problem, then also this narrative about Zelensky. So Zelensky is supposed to be an actor. And we have constantly talked about him being an actor. The Americans are controlling the Ukrainian forces and their government, and Zelensky is just a puppet. That is what we have been arguing. But then we go around and then we blame Zelensky. He doesn't want to negotiate, and he's doing this and doing that. And well, the question is, which one is it? Is he a puppet or is he an independent president? You make up your mind, but you can't butter the bread on both sides. So one or the other. And then I believe it's also what happened is that in May, I get confused. I think in March, when they had the negotiations in Turkey, and they were on a point of making a deal. And then somebody, and we know who that somebody is, went to Zelensky and said, no negotiations. We will support you and give you everything that you need. Just don't make a peace agreement. Why? Because it was existential to the Western world as well, and the Western way of life. Because that is what's on the line. And then Zelensky said, sure, okay, I believe you, let's go do it. Give me the weapons. And then the weapons flown in, and they were distributed. And Zelensky is a marketer. He's an actor, he has to market it, and he has to beg the West for weapons. But of course you must remember, they have to support them in conflict with the Western world's own existence, which is a hard sell. And that's why Zelensky has to do it. And then there's doubt in the Western world. And then Yeah, the leaders have their own pressure, and then the unity proceeds to fall apart. And then Zelensky has to beg again, and sometimes it looks very desperate and so on. But it's not. It's how things are. That's the reality. We're not living in a fantasy world. It's a complicated world. So, decide, is he a puppet or is he not? And what happened then is, so we have this non-event. Make no mistake, it's a non-event. About the Estriana that fell in Poland. And everybody made a big wow of that because it's nothing. Is the world going to go for a World War III and destroy millions of people because 2 people were killed? 2 farmers? Which is clear an accident? And even was a Russian missile, so what? You're going to start World War III on that? Not ridiculous. But that's deviating from the point. Zelensky did the normal narrative he always did. He was marketing it. He was blaming Russia. He was blaming Russia. And unfortunately, he blamed a little bit too long. The narrative stayed a little bit too long. And then it became sort of an error and an embarrassment for him, because Biden immediately was advised that this was an accident and it's not worthwhile going to World War III and so on. And then he made the statement because he was awake. Remember, that's the Eastern world. There, the sun rises before it rises in the West. And then the narrative types of clash. So then the question is, how far, have I mentioned that the question is? Sorry. In any case, so how far is NATO going to go? Well, that's the biggest question that we don't have an answer for. I believe that Americans and the Europeans will supply Ukraine as long as it takes, well, as long as they can, to supply the weapons. And that is driven by this deep state figures. Mark my words. This is not decided by Biden and his cronies. They have the benefit because we know it's a money laundering operation, but we're not going to go there. They're going to keep on. And why? You know, so Biden says they have given Ukraine more than $80 billion. Yeah. Oh, America is going to make themselves bankrupt. What? It's bullshit again. Why? Because the Americans can print money. They have the luxury of printing money. And since the dollar has risen in value against all currencies, doesn't seem to me that printing money has a big influence on that. Are they going to increase their debt level? Yeah, sure. Who cares? The rest of the world, if we, Americans say that, the deep state, if we win this war against Russia and weaken Russia, then we will have saved our way of life, our privileged position in the world, and we can subordinate and suck the rest of the world empty. That is their price. And the question is, how much are they going to pay to get that price? How much are they going to suffer or sacrifice? Yeah, that's the right word. So they're going to print money. I'm not sure, and Europe is holding steady because they believe the narrative they were told by the Americans. It is an existential threat. And the Western Europe is not going to collapse industrial-wise. Yes, there is a gas problem. Yes, make no mistake. Yes, the Russians are still exporting oil and diesel and stuff like to Europe, and they're doing it by ship transfer, and the Europeans know that. I just want to sort of give you some confidence information, which is not really confident. But as I've said many before, I worked in the arms industry in South Africa. And I started working there before the transition in South Africa. So I was still working in the old system. And I did research and development. And the access of papers and information and materials we had was a lot better when we were under sanctions than when we were, when the new government came on, and we were not, when all the sanctions were lifted. So the point here is that when you are sanctioned, yes, everything becomes expensive, more expensive. But there are always middlemen. There are always governments that, like the Americans and the Europeans, that violate their own sanctions. They violate it. You can look it up now. Anyway, they violate their own sanctions clandestine. So the public doesn't know about that. And one of the biggest means is by transferring oil in the deep of the ocean between two ships. The one is a Russian ship, the other one is registered, say, in Germany. The oil is transferred, and then a German boat docks in London Harbour, and that oil is suddenly German oil. That's how it works. That's how Iran survived all these years. And the Americans know that. And the Europeans knew it. And the Europeans know it now as well. So make no mistake. Everything looks gloomy and bad, but no. That's not always work like that. I mean, what did they say in February? It's going to take years, 3-4 years to build LNG terminal in Germany. That's what they said. Well, I think a week or 2 weeks ago, the first one was completed and commissioned, a floating LNG terminal. And how many months is that? Probably 6 months, maybe 4 months after the decision was made. But what I can do, say is, well, no, not for 100% sure. NATO will not get involved in the Ukrainian war as long as possible. They will do everything in their power not to be considered by Russia as a full participant in the war. So, unless they make a mistake, but mistakes are happen, and I have referred it before, Turkey shot down a Russian fighter in Syria, and Russia didn't just start another war against Turkey. So even if mishaps happens, there will be warning, there will be diplomatic issues, but it will be resolved and the war won't start. Because nobody is that stupid. But should the Ukrainians lose and be driven back, then one has to ask yourself, which is the question here, how far is NATO willing to go? If they believe, as I understand it from Lloyd Austin, and from Stoltenberg, and from all the other leaders, yes, I know they're all lying, but remember, in lies there's always a little bit of truth. Always a little bit of truth. But the overall message is that it is existential for the Western life and dominance and privileged position as well. If the West loses in Ukraine, then I'm not sure what they will do then. I know there's good North Korea, but you cannot use North Korea as a way of protecting yourself. You can start a war with China over Taiwan, but what purpose is that going to be? The existential battle is in Ukraine, not other hotspots. Why would America attack Iran? You know, these are all threats to make your partners fear, and then they support you. And it's a basic technique they have been doing for how many years? But it's an obvious technique. But in any case, so at the end of the day, the deep state will make a calculation. Are they going to commit or are they not going to commit? If they are committing when Ukraine falls, then they will commit to a third world war. If it is beneficial to them. But Biden won't decide on that. The deep state will decide on that. But if the war progresses for the Russians to go up to the Dnieper River, they conquer Kherson, Odessa, Nikolaev, and they even conquer Kharkiv, and the northern section and the medium sections and so on, and they just stop in front of Kiev, then Kiev will, the remaining Ukrainians will still be there, but I don't believe that will force the West into a World War III. That would be slow. Same is if the NATO enters the war and they defeat the Russians, they will not go to Moscow. They will stop at the Russian border because they know if they cross the Russian border, then the Russian nuclear doctrine becomes effective. And then we have Armageddon. So as you can see, it's a lot complicated, and there are boundaries, and there are limitations, and there are options, and, well, basically, who the hell knows really? Nobody really knows. But we will see. This is not going to be in Afghanistan. Just the NATO won't force, they won't withdraw, someone like that. They will support Ukraine unless and just remember, like I said many times, in the initial of the fight, there were 200 Ukrainians and 200,000 Russians with the separatists. There are now 700,000 troops of Ukraine. You can look up the map and you can see the distribution of the Ukrainian forces. And now we have 500,000 Russians. You mean the ones that are the reservists that were called up. And now we have, unfortunately, the more soldiers are armed, the more soldiers will die. Just remember, if you're on this side, there's a human being, a normal human being, then on the other side, there's also a similar normal human being. Same intelligence, same capabilities, same logic, same education, nothing different. So don't ever underestimate the opposition. And this is what I'm seeing happening consistently. Just remember, I'm sitting in South Africa, got no skin in the game. Nothing. I don't need to be biased. The only reason why I'm anti-West is because I know the anti-West are lying and you can't believe them. But there's always a little bit of truth in the lies. Don't forget that. So this is food for thought. To sum it up, this war is not going to end shortly. NATO and Americans will keep on supplying weapons, even from their own stockpile. If necessary, they will increase production runs. It's not that they don't have the industrial capability. I mean, like I said, even South Africa can manufacture 155 millimeter artillery rounds. And South Africa produced the 155 rocket-assisted artillery projectile that traveled 67 kilometers, the furthest in anywhere in the American or Ukrainian army or NATO army. And South Africa also has the Grad system type, multiple rocket launchers. It takes a South African system 3 minutes to set up, fire, I think 3 minutes for 40 missiles and then depart. 5 minutes turnaround time. And they are 127 millimeter rockets. And they have ball fragments. And it's an area weapon. And they destroy, I think, a square kilometer with 3 balls per square meter. And it's airburst. Oh, that's a South African system. NATO can come and buy it. It still works. They can get some of our G5 cannons, which is better than an M777, and can shoot that 67 kilometer round, because our ammunition has been manufactured for our artillery pieces. So weapons are always available all over the world. Question is if the country will sell it to you. So, again, I don't know why I use so many of the words so. Should get a different word starting a paragraph. I believe that if the Russians go too far, NATO will have no choice but to intervene. I don't think it will become a nuclear war, but it might develop into World War III. Depending on the cost-benefit calculations made by the deep state and how good they are in convincing their political elite to follow them. But none of that looks as stupid as it seems. Well, nothing is as stupid as it seems. There are always options available. You know, in South Africa we say a boer maak 'n plan, which is a direct translation is a farmer makes a plan. But in South African Afrikaans people were called boere, farmers. And you can see it in this country. We always make a plan, one way or the other. So, nothing wrong in Europe making a plan. You look at the hidden meaning behind things. Don't accept as it is, neither on the West, neither on the East. People are not as stupid as you make them to be. In any case, that's my story for today. Subscribe if you want to. Don't subscribe if you don't want to. Share it. Spread, give it to your friend the link. Or don't. But until next time. Cheers.